But there are key people that have been driving the ships. And what they've been doing is improperly representing me, improperly stealing from me.
Set your mind free. It's the Liberation Tour, starring Mary J. Blige. And the return of D'Angelo.
Now we know why Angie Stone truly hated Mary J. Blige. For years, Angie fought to get the credit she deserved, only to watch Mary take the spotlight, sometimes with music that wasn't even hers to begin with.
I just wanna be left alone.
From stolen songs to industry betrayal, Angie's career was full of setbacks that always seemed to benefit Mary.
There was a whole process and brigade of letters and let's calculate this move so that she will never, ever rise above.
Was this all just bad luck, or was Angie being deliberately pushed aside so that Mary could rise? Let's break it all down. To really understand the tension between Angie Stone and Mary J. Blige, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. Before Mary was crowned the queen of hip-hop soul, and before Angie was seen as an underrated legend, their paths crossed in a way that most people don't even realize. Back in the early 90s, Angie Stone was already making a name for herself in the music industry. She had a background in hip-hop and R&B and was working behind the scenes long before stepping into the spotlight as a solo artist. Angie wasn't just another singer. She was a songwriter, a musician, and someone who really understood the craft. She had already worked with some major names and had experience shaping the sounds of artists around her. Meanwhile, Mary J. Blige was a rising star. She had just been signed to Uptown Records, a label that was shaping the future of R&B and hip-hop. But what most people don't know is that Angie played a role in helping Mary get to where she was. Then came Kurt Woodley, a manager at Uptown Records who played a key role in Mary's early career. He was one of the people behind the scenes who believed in her talent and wanted to develop her into a star. But here's the twist. He saw Angie Stone as the perfect mentor for Mary.
It wasn't like automatic Hall of Fame Mary J. Blige. I'm not taking anything away from her. It was actually the management company, the label, that was dragging their feet because they didn't know what to, well, actually we didn't know what to do with Mary.
Woodley reportedly saw similarities between the two artists. They both had raw, soulful voices. They both blended hip-hop and R&B in a way that felt fresh and different. And because Angie had been in the game longer, Woodley thought she could guide Mary and help shape her artistry. So he brought Angie in to work with Mary, hoping that their connection would be beneficial for both of them. But instead of a friendship forming, things quickly turned sour. According to Angie, Mary never really showed appreciation for the help she was given. She never acknowledged Angie's contributions or even showed gratitude for the guidance. Instead, it was as if Mary wanted to separate herself from Angie altogether. But that wasn't the worst part. Angie Stone didn't just lose industry opportunities, she lost actual music. And not just any music, but something that she had created, something that was deeply personal to her. Years ago, Angie revealed that she had recorded a song with D'Angelo, one of the most iconic R&B singers of his time. If you know anything about D'Angelo, you know he doesn't just collaborate with anybody. He was extremely selective about the artists he worked with, and his music was crafted with deep emotion, raw soul, and layers of meaning. So, for Angie to work with him meant that this track was something special, something that had the potential to be a game changer in her career. But before she could even properly release it, Mary J. Blige allegedly swooped in and took the song without her permission.
Or would you climb a mountaintop and let your love ride?
Now, let's break this down. In the music industry, songs get passed around all the time. Artists often record multiple tracks that don't make it onto their albums, and sometimes those songs get shopped to other artists. Labels have a lot of control over who gets what, and unfortunately, the bigger name usually wins. But this situation wasn't just a case of a song being passed along. It was something much deeper. First off, this was a song Angie had worked on with D'Angelo. It wasn't just something sitting in a vault waiting for a new owner. Angie had personally put in the work, laid down her vocals, and had every intention of using it for herself. But somehow, it ended up in Mary J. Blige's hands. Second, Angie was never even consulted. Nobody asked her for permission. Nobody gave her a heads up. She simply found out that a song she had worked on had been taken, re-recorded, and was now being marketed under Mary's name. And this was happening at a time when Mary J. Blige was at her peak. She had already been crowned the queen of hip-hop soul, meaning that anything she touched turned to gold.
It's all because of you. I'm never sad.
If a track had her name on it, it would get radio play, chart success, and massive industry attention. Angie, on the other hand, was still struggling to get the recognition she deserved. So, what could she really do? This wasn't just about a song. It was about power. About how some artists, no matter how talented they are, get pushed aside so that bigger names can take the spotlight. And in this case, it was Angie being silenced while Mary took the credit. This incident planted the seeds of resentment between them. Because from Angie's perspective, Mary didn't just take a song. She took an opportunity, a moment, a piece of Angie's artistry. And as history would show, this wouldn't be the first time Mary seemed to benefit at Angie's expense. Now, let's talk about something that's impossible to ignore. The strange, almost too close for comfort similarities between Angie Stone's music and Mary J. Blige's. Because once you start looking, it becomes clear that this wasn't just a coincidence. For years, people have been saying that Mary J. Blige was an industry favorite, meaning that the industry protected her, promoted her, and pushed her forward while keeping other artists, like Angie, in the shadows. And when you start comparing their songs, you have to ask yourself, was Mary J. Blige benefiting from Angie's creativity? One of the biggest red flags is their songs about PMS. Both Angie Stone and Mary J. Blige made songs about PMS, something you don't exactly hear about every day in R&B music. And here's where it gets even weirder. Both of their songs sample the exact same track, Al Green's Simply Beautiful.
You got to be good to me. I'm gonna be good to you.
You see, Mary J. Blige released a song called PMS, where she sings about the struggles of being a woman and dealing with all the emotions and physical pain that come with PMS.
I just wanna be left alone.
Angie Stone, on the other hand, had a song called Time of the Month, which is basically about the same thing.
See, I'm in pain. These migraines and my cramps again.
Both songs came out in the early 2000s, and both artists chose to sample the same Al Green song, a track that wasn't even commonly sampled at the time. That's already suspicious. But then, when you look deeper, there are even more connections. Angie Stone also had a song called $20, and guess what? That song also sampled Simply Beautiful. And if that's not enough, let's talk about Soul Insurance. Now, Soul Insurance is one of the most revealing songs in Angie's catalog because, in it, she literally calls out people for copying her style. She sings about not getting the credit she deserves and how people in the industry have been stealing from her and getting away with it.
It's that time of the month. Don't even mess with me.
So, at this point, fans started putting two and two together. Angie wasn't just making random accusations. There was real proof in the music itself. Think about it. Mary J. Blige was dominating the charts during this time, getting all the mainstream attention and winning awards. Meanwhile, Angie was still fighting for her place in the industry. And yet, despite not having the same level of success, somehow, her ideas and musical choices were mysteriously showing up in Mary's music. Coincidence? Maybe once or twice, but multiple times, with the same samples, same themes, and the same vibes? That's harder to ignore, and it wasn't just the fans who noticed. Angie herself has spoken about how the industry mistreated her, how she was pushed aside, and how other artists got to shine off of her creativity. If Mary J. Blige wasn't directly copying Angie, then someone on her team was definitely making sure she stayed ahead by watching what Angie was doing and replicating it in a way that would be more marketable. And this is where the real frustration comes in. Because for an artist like Angie, who spent years perfecting her craft, pouring her soul into her music, and working hard to build her own unique sound, seeing someone else take the credit must have been infuriating. It's one thing to have influence. Every artist is influenced by someone. But what happened between Mary J. Blige and Angie Stone goes deeper than that. It wasn't just about inspiration. It was about control, power, and making sure one artist got the spotlight while the other was left in the dark. And this wasn't just about music. There was a personal side to all of this too, because when you add in the D'Angelo connection, with Mary J. Blige and D'Angelo going on tour together years later, things start looking even messier. You see, Angie Stone and D'Angelo were once a powerhouse couple, both in their personal lives and in music. Angie played a huge role in shaping D'Angelo's career. She helped him develop his sound, guided him in the industry, and was by his side as he rose to fame. But after their breakup, things took a very dark turn. Years later, Angie discovered that people in D'Angelo's camp were spreading lies about her. These weren't just small rumors, these were career-destroying accusations. They painted Angie as someone who was controlling, difficult to work with, and worst of all, the person who introduced D'Angelo to drugs and alcohol. Now let's just stop and think about that for a second. Angie, who had worked so hard to support D'Angelo, was suddenly being blamed for his struggles. And not just blamed privately. Letters were allegedly sent out to industry executives, making sure that people saw her in a bad light. This didn't just hurt Angie emotionally, it damaged her reputation. Being labeled as difficult in the music industry is basically a death sentence. The same doors that were once open for her were suddenly slamming shut. And then, years later, guess who D'Angelo ends up going on tour with? Mary J. Blige. This is where things get really suspicious. In 2012, Mary J. Blige and D'Angelo announced the Liberation Tour. This was a big deal because it marked D'Angelo's return to the US stage after a long break. He had been out of the spotlight for years, and suddenly, he was back, and touring with Mary.
Set your mind free. It's the Liberation Tour, starring Mary J. Blige and the return of D'Angelo.
Now, for casual fans, this might have just seemed like a cool musical pairing. But for those who knew about Angie's history with both artists, it raised a lot of eyebrows. Why? Because for years, there had been whispers about Mary and D'Angelo's relationship. There were rumors that the two had a personal connection beyond just music. And considering the way things ended between Angie and D'Angelo, along with Mary's alleged history of taking things from Angie, it wouldn't be surprising if this just added more fuel to the fire. Was this tour strictly business, or was there something more going on? Fans started putting two and two together. First, Angie was blacklisted and falsely accused of ruining D'Angelo's life. Then, years later, he was touring with Mary, the same artist who had already been accused of taking Angie's ideas and benefiting from her work. It was almost like a pattern. For Angie, watching her ex, her former musical partner, and the woman who allegedly took credit for her work come together must have been devastating. It was like she was being erased from her own history. And the more people looked into it, the more it seemed like the Liberation Tour wasn't just about music, it was about alliances. Was Mary benefiting from D'Angelo's downfall the same way she allegedly benefited from Angie's ideas? Was this just a coincidence, or was it another calculated industry move to make sure Angie stayed in the shadows while others took the spotlight? One thing is for sure, the connections between these three ran deep. And when you follow the timeline, it's hard to ignore that something bigger was going on behind the scenes. If there's one thing we've learned from the music industry, it's that power plays don't happen by accident. Angie Stone wasn't just another talented artist who faded into the background. She was pushed there. And while others reaped the benefits of the very foundation she helped build, she was forced to fight for recognition every step of the way. You see, her journey started long before the neo-soul movement, before D'Angelo's rise, and before Mary J. Blige became a household name.
Is my king, is my one, yes, he's my father.
Angie Stone's journey in the music industry was nothing short of extraordinary. Born Angela Laverne Brown on December 18, 1961, in Columbia, South Carolina, her love for music started at an early age. Raised in a church-going family, she was introduced to gospel music, which played a huge role in shaping her powerful, soulful voice. Unlike many artists who struggle to find their sound, Angie knew from a young age that music was her calling. She grew up listening to artists like Aretha Franklin, Curtis Mayfield, and Marvin Gaye. Singers who weren't just making music but telling stories and shaping the culture. Her career officially began in the late 1970s when she became part of the pioneering hip-hop trio, The Sequence.
We bad, we know it, we got our stuff to show it, so what you see.
At a time when hip-hop was still in its infancy, Angie and her groupmates, Cheryl the Pearl Cook, and Gwendolyn Blondie Chisholm, made history by becoming one of the first female rap groups to sign with Sugar Hill Records. Their hit song, Funk You Up, was a game-changer, proving that women had a place in the male-dominated world of hip-hop. The track became an anthem, later being sampled by Dr. Dre for his classic song, Keep Their Heads Ringin'. However, as the years went by, hip-hop evolved, and female groups like The Sequence were pushed aside. Instead of fading into obscurity, Angie reinvented herself. She transitioned from rap to R&B, lending her unmistakable voice to groups like Vertical Hold, where she gained attention with their hit, Seems You're Just Too Busy. But Angie's true breakthrough came in the 1990s when she embraced the emerging neo-soul movement. Neo-soul was a response to the over-commercialized R&B of the time. While mainstream R&B was being shaped by glossy production and pop influences, neo-soul was raw, emotional, and deeply rooted in black music traditions. Angie Stone quickly became one of the faces of this movement alongside artists like Erykah Badu, D'Angelo, Jill Scott, and Maxwell. Her 1999 debut solo album, Black Diamond, was a critical success. Songs like No More Rain in This Cloud and Every Day showcased her deep, sultry vocals and heartfelt storytelling. The album, named after her daughter Diamond, proved she was more than just a backup singer or a forgotten hip-hop pioneer. She was a solo star in her own right. By the early 2000s, Angie was solidifying her legacy with albums like Mahogany Soul and Stone Love. Her hit Wish I Didn't Miss You became one of the defining songs of the decade, with its unforgettable sample of the OJ's Backstabbers. The song, filled with pain and longing, resonated with people who had ever experienced heartbreak. Even today, it remains one of the most sampled and referenced R&B songs. But while Angie's music career was flourishing, her personal life was complicated. One of the most defining relationships of her life was with D'Angelo, the neo-soul superstar whose talent and struggles mirrored her own. The two met in the mid-90s and quickly developed a deep bond, both personal and musical. Angie played a massive role in shaping D'Angelo's early career, working on his debut album Brown Sugar and helping him craft the sound that made him a legend.
Brown sugar, babe. I guess high up your love, I don't know how to behave.
Their relationship was intense but short-lived. By the time D'Angelo's career skyrocketed with Voodoo, their romance had ended. However, even after they parted ways, their connection remained strong. Angie later revealed that after they broke up, someone from D'Angelo's camp sent letters to industry executives falsely accusing her of introducing him to drugs and alcohol. The smear campaign was an attempt to destroy her reputation, and for years she suffered the consequences. Despite the industry setbacks, Angie continued to push forward. She dropped more albums, collaborated with legends like Prince and Stevie Wonder, and even tried her hand at acting, starring in The Fighting Temptations, alongside Beyoncé and Cuba Gooding Jr. She also made appearances on reality shows like R&B Divas, giving fans a glimpse into the struggles of being a veteran artist in an ever-changing industry. In her later years, Angie Stone remained a fierce advocate for real musicianship, never hesitating to call out the industry's decline. She was especially vocal about how Black women, particularly those over 40, were routinely sidelined despite their undeniable contributions to music. She refused to let the industry erase her or the artists who paved the way. Then, in 2025, tragedy struck. Angie's life was cut short in a devastating car crash, leaving behind a legacy that could never be erased.
R&B singer Angie Stone has died in a car crash. We're told she had just finished a concert in Mobile, Alabama Friday, was heading to Atlanta when the van she was riding in crashed.
Fans were heartbroken, and tributes poured in from across the industry. Ironically, the same music world that had overlooked her contributions for years was now honoring her as a legend. Others were calling out the industry for allegedly having something to do with her demise. One particular person wrote, Angie Stone was speaking about how Universal and Arista taking her royalties, taking everything she literally owned. Come to find out, she said that she researched and found out what they were doing to her, and she was planning to sue Universal Music Group allegedly. If you know about the death clauses in the industry, if you know, you know. But now that she's gone, the question remains, did she ever truly get the justice she deserved? Or was her story buried by the very industry that spent decades trying to silence her? One thing is certain, Angie Stone never stopped fighting for the truth, and even in death, her impact refuses to be forgotten. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.